Welcome to the Idaho Main Street Podcast, where we talk about the issues that matter to you.
Welcome back to the podcast. We're excited today to be joined by just a fixture in Idaho, somebody who's been around for a minute and involved in a lot of great causes. We're here with Rod Grammer, the former president for Idaho Business for Education, also served a stint running the Idaho Press Club, the president over there, and 4 decades in journalism and media, former television executive journalist. Rod, the first question, is there anything you haven't done?
I haven't done I don't have my own podcast, so that's probably my next step.
It's overrated. Well, we appreciate you taking time to join our podcast today.
You bet.
There's a lot of exciting things happening in this state. I'm interested in your perspective on, how the business and education world collide. We got some exciting things going to pop up in the legislature. Maybe we start today and talk a little bit about your experience with nearly 4 decades in journalism and media. Walk us through what that experience was like and how over that period of time it's changed.
Well, I started out in the newspaper business. I'm from Boise. I was born and raised here. So after college, getting my degree in history and journalism, I joined my hometown paper, The Statesman. And so I did almost everything you can do at the paper. Everything from reporting to editing, running the city desk to serving as political editor, and then my last job was editorial page editor and columnist. And during that course of time, I covered several sessions of the Idaho legislature, so got to know the politics of the state pretty well. And then I had this opportunity. General manager of our local NBC affiliate called me and asked me if I could come over and run his newsroom. I had no plans to go into television. In fact, I never took a television or radio course in college because I was totally a print person. And so I did that for 10 years. Then the company that owned us was Belo out of Dallas, Texas. It was a great company, combined newspaper and TV company. So I kind of felt like I was going home in some ways with that company. They owned the Dallas Morning News and several other great papers in the country. Although they split up after I left the company, not because of me, but because Gannett took over their TV stations. Anyway, and then the company asked me to go to Portland. So I ran the news department in Portland for about 13 and a half years. And then I was general manager, vice president of 2 24-hour news channels in Tampa, Florida. So I did a lot of varied work in the media, and it was just a really rewarding career. And of course, I saw it change drastically over the years. But then I came home in 2013 to take over as president of Idaho Business for Education, which was really a way for me to give back to the state that I love, and also education, because any success I've had in life professionally is because of education.
The Fourth Estate seems to be kind of in this weird, middle ground right now. When you think of it's becoming more and more decentralized. I don't profess to be a journalist by any means, but some more prominent and successful podcasters do. Why is it so important that the American public can trust the news media they're getting? And do you think we're going to that the ship will kind of settle here when it comes to how this Fourth Estate operates when information's coming in and what we can trust and who's biased and who's fair?
Well, we've seen this change in the media coming really throughout my career. I was actually part of the change in terms of moving from traditional media like newspapers and television to new media. In fact, I started the first news website here in the state of Idaho in 1976. In fact, it was the first one in our company. And I think my journalism background gave me the opportunity. Those were pioneer days, really, when you think about digital media. But my background in both TV and newspaper made me see right away the power of online journalism, which is why I started the first one here in the state. but we've had this sort of consolidation, not just in companies, but we've had this consolidation in companies, but we've had this diffusion in sources of news. Um, and it's that both concentration and diffusion, which has created a lot of the problems that we've got today. It used to be, the family would sit down at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock and watch Walter Cronkite or David Brinkley. Everybody would be getting the same news across the country from one of the three major networks. But now the diffusion of information has just exploded on all platforms, especially digital platforms and social media. So people are not getting, necessarily information that is filtered through trained journalists. And I know that journalism is out of favor right now. But those of us who study journalism and spent our careers in journalism, we had people probably disagree with me, but we were trained to look at both sides of the story. We were trained to make sure that the information we published or aired was accurate. We were trained to be ethical. And so, because there's so little trust anymore on the source of information for lots of reasons, people are getting information just by rumor, or sometimes it is fake, especially on social media. So, we need news literacy in this country very badly, and so that people can start trusting the source of their information again. And when I'm on social media, I do look at the source of the information, and I give more weight to rightfully or wrongfully, from sources that I know are trustworthy and they've vetted the information. That's not to say that occasionally I like somebody else's comments who I don't know from Adam, but I've sort of gotten to that point where if it sounds like something I would support, I do like it. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, that's great, Rod. I love this idea of news literacy, because what concerns me is the motivation behind the media when it comes to the consumer side. So I always have to weigh am I viewing this piece of journalism from a motivation of education or entertainment? And I think as a society, we've shifted heavy towards, we're looking for our journalists and our media to be far more entertaining. And there's a place for that. But sometimes when you think of your 24-hour news stations, it's really hard to cut the difference between, okay, what is an entertainment piece and what is an education piece? And knowing that, kind of the foundation for everything you're doing in life is all based on education, is sometimes we forget that, like, the purpose of this article is not to make me feel good and happy or to confirm what I already know. It's to educate me. And we too often throw out the stuff that it leans on the education side because it lacks the entertainment value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Being on this other side of the news for the past 11 years, in many ways, I'm very disappointed with my colleagues. And I still consider myself a journalist. I still do a lot of writing, opinion writing here, which is one of the great joys that I have. But at a time when our democracy is under historic threat, in fact, around the world, our democracies are under tremendous threat. We need a free media that is professional, has credible information, that helps inform and educate people on what's going on in the world more than we ever have in probably the history of our country. And because of economic forces, social forces, and other forces, our media I'm not sure we're up to the task. I sure hope I'm wrong with that. But I am concerned. And speaking of 24-hour news, and of course, the stations I ran were not, they were local to the Tampa area, but they were not in the same format as, say, Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN. We actually provided real news. We didn't just have talking heads. I think one of the worst things that has happened to American media is the development of 24-hour news. It started out with Ted Turner providing real news on CNN and real journalism, and they still do real journalism. But unfortunately, because it's cheaper and it's titillating to the viewers, Fox News and MSNBC and CNN have become this landscape of talking heads and opinion makers that sort of increase the rage that we have in the country. And I think one of the worst things that have ever happened to us are those talking heads. And look at Fox News, and I know Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes had a far right, still have a far right philosophy, even though Roger Ailes is dead now. But it was also a business, and to their credit, they saw a gap in information, and they knew that you can make a heck of a lot of money by creating a conservative to far right news channel. And as business leaders, that was a very smart, wise decision, and it's paid off for them in financially greatly. So anyway, but I think for our democracy, the advent of 24-hour talking heads on all three of these networks that have different philosophies is one of the worst things that have ever happened to us.
Yeah, and to your point about the station that you were operating in Tampa, I think as we concentrate down to more local, the news gets more and more real. So I love Governor Cox always tells us that potholes aren't partisan. And so our most local news, in theory, becomes more real news. And that's the beauty of covering some of these state issues, which I'm excited to talk about, is we can kind of cut away a lot of stuff that on the national front gets loud and convoluted and talk about, okay, what's happening in the Idaho legislature right now. So I know, Rod, you're gearing up for an exciting legislative session that you get to follow, and there's some education stuff that's going to come down the road. You've been involved in that. What excites you about this session coming up, and what concerns you?
Not much excites me, frankly, but a lot concerns me. And education is going to be the issue, as it has been for the last few years, and cultural issues, of course, which are also tied back to education. So for the last 6 years, we've been battling the voucher programs, various forms of it. Probably the first several years I was with IBE, we're making great progress on literacy funding, teacher salaries, college and career advising, workforce development. But in the last 6 years, we've really turned to the voucher issues and these cultural issues that really have nothing to do with student success. And that's really disappointing to me, because we have so many of our students that are vulnerable, so many of our students that need help in education. And instead of really focusing on the things that could really help change lives and create the workforce our state needs, we've just been wasting all of our time, all of our money on these sideshows for the last 6 years. And it really saddens me, because these are real lives out there. These young people who, it's our responsibility as adults to help them get educated so that they can have a good life, so that they can achieve the American dream. And we have really been doing everything but serving them and trying to improve education for their sake. So it's very sad. But this session, the number one issue will be, as it has been the last several years, the voucher issue. And we've killed vouchers now 5 times since 2018. And we are one of the few really Republican states that does not have vouchers, along with Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, and some other states. We have successfully pushed them back. So we haven't headed down that road, but because of the politics the last 2 or 3 election cycles, we've probably got a bigger battle this session than we've ever had in the past.
Sure. So Rod, our conservative listeners, they immediately hear a lot of other red states are doing this. We're one of the last ones to not. And for some, that immediately says, well, we don't want to be grouped in with the liberal states and their policies. So shouldn't we also join along with other wise conservative leading states and followed? Like, I mean, it can't all be wrong, right?
Well, the problem with vouchers is it's not a partisan issue. It's actually very much a nonpartisan issue. And all these states I mentioned, Texas, Idaho, Tennessee, and these other states, it's not a Republican issue and it's not a Democratic issue. In fact, our staunchest opponents of vouchers in Idaho, Texas, and Tennessee, for example, are Republicans. And all these states have successfully fought vouchers because of those Republican legislators. And then, yeah, they get help from the Democrats, but in Idaho, we have very few Democrats in the legislature. But we do have enough Democrats to help these, what I call Main Street Republicans. This is very much a bipartisan issue, at least on the opposing side, not on the other side. But one thing I just really like to say is there is nothing conservative about vouchers. This is definitely not a conservative play. It is an extremist play. And vouchers really bust state budgets. They lead to tax increases. Everything that you think about fiscal responsibility goes out the window with vouchers. And that's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of Republican legislators. And so it's definitely not a conservative versus liberal issue, a Democrat versus Republican issue. In many ways, it's a conservative versus extremist issue.
So we're fortunate in Idaho because we can look to cautionary tales in other states. We don't have to be the pioneer to run this down and see what the policy looks like. So I know Idaho Ed News had an article this morning that outlined in Arizona, for example, what was happening. So we're fortunate that we get to look at another state and say, okay, is this what we want or is this not what we want? We can kind of objectively see what's going on. Is there anything going on in Arizona with the vouchers, the ESA issue that you think, okay, that is a argument to consider it in Idaho?
Absolutely. I started about 2, 3 years ago. I'm a real fan of Stephen Covey,
Okay.
author of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his 7 habits, which I have always tried to apply in my professional and personal life, is begin with the end in mind. And so a few years ago, as I've been fighting the voucher issue, and I knew it was going to come up in the next session, I thought to myself, how can I really understand this issue better? So I thought of Covey and I thought about begin with the end in mind. So I started doing deep research and this was the journalist in me. And by the way, I might say that I came to this issue. I'm not an educator, I was a journalist. So I came to this issue not with any biases. I came to it and started investigating it like I would as a journalist, right? Looking at, are there pros, are there cons, what's really going on here? So anyway, I started doing this deep research in all these other voucher states, and I just learned a lot. and and Arizona really is a great example of what can happen. Frankly, it's happening in all the other states too, but right now, Arizona is kind of the poster child for this. They've had vouchers for a lot of years, but what really broke the bank, so to speak, literally, was when they adopted universal vouchers. The first one in the country to pass a universal education savings account. That just opened the floodgate for a lot of money to flow out to students. And one thing that's significant, there's lots of things, I could talk about this for an hour, but or more. But when vouchers were first passed in 1990 in Wisconsin, the very first voucher law for the school district for Milwaukee, it was sponsored by a Democratic Black African-American senator. People are shocked when they hear that. Polly Williams was the first sponsor of a voucher bill, but she did it because of the racism in the Milwaukee school district. And her inner city Black kids were just not getting a great education, and there was a lot of segregation and racism. So Polly supported this bill in hopes of moving her African American Black students from public schools to private schools. And So it started out as sort of an equity play. But over the years, Polly actually repudiated what she did because it was co-opted. And now in all these voucher states, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Arizona, 70%, between 2/3 and 70% of the students that get vouchers have never been in a public school. So it's not an equity play anymore. It is what I call the biggest government giveaway, handout, entitlement, whatever you want to call it, in the history of the states. And so what's happened in Arizona when they passed the universal bill is that 70% of the students that get vouchers now in Arizona have never been in the public schools. And the problem with that is that basically it has become a subsidy rather than transferring kids, vulnerable kids, from public schools to private schools. And the other problem from a conservative fiscal responsibility point of view is this is all new money that the taxpayers are on the hook for. So when Polly passed that first bill and a student left the public schools, went to the private schools, the money followed the student over to the private or religious school. But now, because 70% of the students have never been in the public school, it's all new money that the legislature is responsible for coming up with. And that's why Arizona is facing almost $1 billion state budget deficit. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's why I say this is not a conservative issue. This is not a fiscally responsible issue. It's shocking to me that people who think they're conservatives are giving away free money to people who are sometimes make $250,000 a year. It's shocking.
I think that's a great point you bring up that I didn't know before. You're telling us that 70%, a majority of individuals who are receiving funds from taxpayer funds are individuals who are already in private schools and have already provided the means to do that for a period of time. And now what we've done is we've just, your word, a new subsidy is given, but we have to, now these state legislatures have to find an offset somewhere.
Yeah, and what's happening in Arizona now, in fairness, I want to say that their deficit is a combination of two decisions. The first is that Governor Ducey and the legislature have consistently been cutting the income tax down there. So it's actually under 4%, I think it is. I think it's like 3.6%. So obviously, that's like a family actually volunteering to cut their family income, right? And then the second thing is the universal vouchers pass. So that combination of those two, I think, fiscally irresponsible decisions have led to the problem in Arizona. So what's the ramification? What has happened? Well, to balance the state budget, they're cutting road projects, they're cutting funding for community colleges, they're cutting funding for public schools. They even cut, this is dry, one of the driest states in the country. They even cut a $133 million water project because they can't afford it anymore. Can you imagine that? Like if we did that in Idaho, we're so dependent on water. But that's the kind of thing that will happen in our state if we do this. We'll be cutting things that our citizens really need, like good roads and good community colleges and good water projects and other things. But the problem with vouchers is, especially when it's what I call new money or a new financial burden on taxpayers, what happens is we only have so much money. And when we start funding not just our public schools, but we fund private schools, religious schools, and home schools, it puts a squeeze on the state general fund, meaning not just K through 12 gets hurt, but there's unintended consequences for all these other things that the citizens of our state need, like education and roads and water projects and other things. But that's what's happening in Arizona because of these really, I call them extremist decisions that have nothing to do with being conservative.
Yeah, my old political science professor would say that the only thing harder than getting an entitlement passed is getting an entitlement repealed. And I arguably in Arizona, you could objectively consider these popular in terms of the numerical applications are ballooning, right? This idea that people can have access to these funds on face value looks popular. I don't know if you're comfortable with that word or not, using them as popular, but you're asking Idaho legislators and lawmakers to reject something that could in theory be popular in Idaho, but cause a massive conflict with things that are necessary to fund in Idaho. Is that safe to say?
No, it's actually just the opposite. So somebody asked me the other day, is there momentum for vouchers? And I said, oh, absolutely, because they've taken out so many Main Street Republicans in Idaho, these out-of-state billionaires that are pushing this. But if you look across the country, these legislators that have been defeated in Idaho or Texas and other states, they are never, these are Main Street Republicans, actually traditional conservatives, they are. They've never been attacked on the voucher issue. Uh, I'm going to use this example. There's a Texas legislator named Glenn Rogers who I've written about. Glenn Rogers is a sixth generation Texas rancher. He is huge for gun freedom. He's huge for border control. He's a traditional conservative, but he knows that vouchers are not good for his state, either for his public schools or for the fiscal responsibility of the state. So these billionaires spent millions of dollars to take him out in the March primary in Texas. They accused him of being soft on gun control, which he isn't, obviously. They accused him of supporting Joe Biden's border policies, which he hasn't, obviously. But they never, ever, ever mention vouchers because they know vouchers is unpopular with the people. And the proof of that politically is that whenever they attack these legislators in Idaho, Texas, Tennessee, they never, ever attack them on their opposition to vouchers. And then in November, when we had arguably the most conservative person that ever run for president at the top of the ballot, three states rejected vouchers, and two of them are Republican. One is purple to blue. Soundly defeated it in Kentucky, soundly defeated it in Nebraska, and soundly defeated it in Colorado. So when the people get a chance to vote, they're against this. And the reason I think the theory is wrong is that vouchers really serve a minority of people. Um, in Idaho, and I'll just use our state, but you can take our state, then magnify it for Arizona and other states. We have 314,000 public school students in Idaho. We have, by one estimate, 36,000 homeschool, religious, and private school students in Idaho. So
Wow.
it really is,
A tenth.
all these states are the same. 90% of the students are in the public schools. So really, this is a subsidy giveaway to a minority of people, and oftentimes very wealthy people. Um, and that's why I say it's not popular, because you got the vast majority of parents who have nothing to do with vouchers, right? And they don't benefit from vouchers. So this is billionaires spending lots of money in our states to defeat Republican Main Street traditional conservative Republicans like Glenn, and in our state, people like Julie Yamamoto, Carl Crabtree, and others, uh, people who are truly conservative Republicans in the old Reagan sense. Um, and they're taking them out, but it's never because they oppose vouchers.
Sure. Oh, well, I know we could spend hours talking about this, and I think we will. I think if you're open to it as this legislative session gets rocking and rolling, love to have you on and talk the intricacies of any negotiated bills that are happening or compromises and what that looks like. So we're going to have you back. Before we kick you off today, uh, if I'm not mistaken, you've been married for over 40 years. Is that correct?
47 and a half.
47. Okay, so we're pushing towards that 50. Your wife, a marriage and family therapist.
She's retired, however.
Yes, but
And that's why
she's a
we've been married
professional.
27 and a half years, because I have a built-in marriage and family counselor.
Exactly. So this is going to be a very selfish question for a man who's still out looking, but for listeners who have been married for close to 50 years or for 5 minutes, depart with us today with one piece of wisdom that you'd give when it comes to a successful near 50 years of marriage, married to somebody who's a professional in the space. What can you tell us to keep the love alive?
Well, I think when you find the person who's special in your life, you've really got to like that person. Love them, yes, but you got to like them because, once the once the infatuation of their beauty and all that, it never leaves, of course, but if they are your best friend and you like them, that goes a long way. The other thing is that you have to continually make a commitment to the relationship because all marriages have ups and downs, stresses of daily life, financial, others. So you have to really recommit all the time to this person. And you have to remember, why did you marry them in the first place? Why did you love them in the first place? Because that helps you remember. And then it just reinforces that like, it always reinforces that commitment. And the last thing I would say is have a sense of humor. Be able to laugh together, at yourselves, at each other, at the world. Just have a sense of humor about things. Julie and I, sometimes we just are just break down laughing, and it's just a lot of fun to be married to someone like that. So I'd say commitment, friendship, and a good sense of humor.
Wow, that's fantastic advice. So anyone keeping track with their bingo card, we started by covering the trials and triumphs of the Fourth Estate and journalism and media. You gave us a fantastic explanation of what's going on with ESAs and vouchers and the numbers and the problems that come with the 70%, subsidizing 70% of people who haven't been in the public school system. That's something I didn't know before, which is fantastic. And then we concluded with some fantastic marital advice on the Rubik's Cube that is relationships. So, Rod, this has been an incredibly valuable piece of my time being able to spend with you. So thank you so much for your wit and wisdom today. And we look forward to having you back.
Okay, thanks.
You too. Till next time.